Welcome to Echo 321, Study Session 13, Diagnostic Analysis of Nigeria's Growth and Development. Introduction. This study session, which is mainly extracted from a report by Shoyibo Bankole Lawansin Olaniyan Adewuyi and Folawewo 2008, makes a diagnostic review of development process in Nigeria. The report provides a trend analysis of overall country growth and sectoral growth analysis. A review of development strategies and programs is also made, while attempt is made to identify the development projects and programs within the development strategy of the country. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Provide a diagnostic analysis of Nigeria's growth and development. 2. Evaluate the effects of unemployment on GDP. 3. Explain the main focus of needs. Nigeria's average growth rate of real GDP and real per capita GDP. Over the years, Nigeria has tottered on an average growth rate of less than 5% per annum since 1960 to date. The country experienced rapid economic growth between 1960 and 1970 with average growth rate of real GDP of about 6.1%. The growth experience of this period was brought about by export boom of such primary products as agricultural produce like cocoa, groundnut, and palm oil. This economic performance was further consolidated by the discovery and large commercial quantity export of crude oil. Thus, the rise in international market price of petroleum during this period gave rise to unprecedented growth in domestic production and national income, resulting in average growth of about 9% in real GDP between 1970 and 1975. This performance of the economy had landmark effect on the development with rising activities in the industrial sector. This also led to growth in real GDP, which grew at an annual average of about 4.6% over the years 1960 to 1975. However, the boom experienced in the economy and the rapid pace of development was reversed by the sudden crash in the world price of crude oil that occurred between 1970s and the early 1980s. The fall in the world price of oil impacted on the economy negatively, so much so that its fortune started to decline rapidly. The downward trend in the growth path of the economy was climaxed with an annual negative growth rate of 1.9% over the period of 1980 to 1985. This also resulted in significant reduction in welfare as indicated by the negative growth rate of 4.6% in the per capita income. Figure 1 shows that although the economy was able to recover from its slump in 1985 and 1988 with real GDP growth rates of 9.7 and 9.9% respectively, the recovery was not enough to return the economy to its former upward trend. For example, in 1990, the average growth rate of the real GDP has remained below 5%, while that of real capital has remained less than 2%. The general unimpressive performance of the overall economy has a trickle-down effect at sectoral level. First, the trend in the growth rate of index of agricultural output has continued to fluctuate over the years, while agricultural sector's output experienced a sustained high level of growth between 1960 to 1972. It assumed decline growth rate by 1975. However, given the oil glut experience beginning from early 1980s a renewed focus paid for the agricultural sector, and this resulted in fluctuating growth rate of the economy's output. For example, the aggregate index of agricultural production rose by 3.3% in 1999 compared to 3.1% recorded in 1998. The decrease in prices ranged from 16 to 9% for soya milk to 30.8% for cocoa, and this was attributed to increased supply and reduction in demand. The fluctuation in the agricultural output has continued ever since, despite various efforts and policies directed towards improving performance of the sector. Several factors were being identified as, according to the unimpressive performance of the agricultural sector, such as deteriorating in the rural area, lack of working capital, low rate of environmental degradation, adoption of appropriate technology, poor harvest technology, and so on. Growth rate of industrial and manufacturing production indexes. As with the case of agriculture, the ripple effect of the poor performance of the aggregate economy has a negative effect on industrial output performance, as shown in figure 2. The growth rate of industrial output index reached its peak in 1979, standing at 70%, and then started a downward trend. The initial increase in industrial output coincided with the period of oil boom, which gave rise to establishment of different industries across the country, as indicated in figure 2. The aggregate annual growth rate of oil output index was around 45% over the period of 1961 to 1974. However, immediately oil sector began to experience decline in its output growth rate, the industrial sector production index also starts to dwindle. Beginning from 1980 up until 2006, average annual growth rate of oil output index hovered around 9.5%, while that of industrial sector was about less than 3%. The manufacturing sector is another important sector in this analysis. The growth rate of index manufacturing output has remained very low over the years. The different development plans, policies, and programs implemented by successive governments have yielded little positive impact on the manufacturing sector. The sector's growth rate, as indicated in 2, has been characterized by little increases and lots of declines. The average yearly growth rate manufacturing output index between 1964 and 1980 was about 10%. The high level growth in the sector during this period was brought about by the boom in the oil sector. The healthy performance of the sector was, however, reversed by the general poor performance of the economy that resulted from the oil shock of the 1980s. Thus, the manufacturing sector began to exercise a drastic fall in its output, with rate of growth of output averaging about 1.5 over the period of 1980 to 1920. This has resulted persistently in low capacity utilization within the sector and its inability to generate much employment. Although the manufacturing subsector recorded a moderate recovery from 1999 from what it experienced before the civilian government, the sector still finds it difficult to change the taste and orientation of the people for imported goods. According to a nationwide report conducted by the CBN, which covers 560 manufacturing establishments, the weighted average capacity utilization rate of the subsector raised from 30.3% 1998 to 34.3% in 1999. The total cost of operation also increased by 14.2% over the level in 1998, due mainly to high cost of raw materials, machinery and spare parts. The value of imported raw materials rose significantly by 34.7% and accounted for about 47.5% total value of raw materials used, while the value of locally sourced raw materials accounting for 53.5% of total increased by 5.8%. Furthermore, growth in the manufacturing subsector was impaired largely by low demand for locally manufactured goods occasioned by the influx of cheaper production in the country. Other constraints include poor state of social and economic infrastructure, including erratic power supply and water supply, as well as poor performing transport and communication systems. Human development in Nigeria. The poor performance of the economy has also affected human development negatively, as in the case of some development indicators. Although there has been no slow progressive improvement in the social service sectors, the improvement has not been able to lead to a level of the desirable development. Government efforts and various policies and programs in the social services sector have yielded some result. From a level of 11.5 million in 1987, number of pupils in primary schools gradually rose to 21 million in 2005, yielding an annual growth rate of 3%. Similarly, secondary and tertiary enrollment have also witnessed a rise, with each moving from 2.9 and 0.4 to 1987 to 4.6 and 1.4 in 2005, respectively. Thus, while the secondary school enrollment has grown on an average of 3% over the period, tertiary enrollment has grown faster at any annual average of 8.7%. This trend has resulted in significant improvement in adult literacy rate in the country, with literacy rate rising from a level of 25% to 69.1% to 1970. This improvement in adult literacy has been launched in September 1999 with Enlightenment Campaign to elicit support from the civilian administration. Despite the above, the educational subsector is bedeviled by a lot of problems. Schools at all levels lack teachers and basic infrastructure. They suffer from overcrowding, poor sanitation, poor conditions of service for teachers, resulting in poor quality of teaching and poor quality of product. This subsector has equally been burdened by frequent industrial disputes that strikes actions. It suffered from poor management, manifested in poor intra-sectional allocation, multiplicity of agencies, with at both the primary and secondary levels were owned up to 6 months' salaries, while those who have retired were not getting their pensions as at when due. In the health subsector, service delivery by key institutions designed to mitigate the health conditions of vulnerable groups have been hampered by deterioration of basic facilities, and poor funding, among many others. These have led to the deterioration in the health system to the extent that hospitals are described as mere consulting clinics. The situation has been compounded by the mass exodus of experienced Nigerian health experts to other countries in search of better conditions of service and greener pasture. The hospitals are poorly equipped, infrastructure remains poor, inadequate, and fast deteriorating. As a result, there is high infant under 5 and maternal mortality and prevalence of many diseases, several of which, consequently, policies designed for the health subsector have had little effect on its performance. For example, the proportion of population per physician declined from a level of 12,550 in 1980 to 4,300 in 1990, only to rise again to 4.529 in the year 2000 before falling again to 4.310 in 2005. The number of population per physician in Nigeria is far less than the minimum accepted level by the World Bank. However, some level of improvement was recorded in terms of reduction in infant mortality. The infant mortality rate fell from 143 per thousand live births to 1,970 to 135 in 1980, and further from 98 to 1990 to $84.80 in 2000 and 2005 respectively. Nigeria's Human Poverty Index. Overall, the trend of economic performance and development within the social sectors has significantly affected living standards in the country. The United Nations Human Development Indicators show that the percentage of Nigerians living below the minimum poverty line was about 38.2 in 1997 and 37.3 in 2007. This evidence is further corroborated by the Human Development Index, which is used to measure general living conditions that encompass access to good welfare, electricity, communication, adequate transportation, sanitation, galleries, and other food items. The HDI for Nigeria in 1970 stood at 0.305 and slightly improved to 0.385 in 1980. This improvement continued with a further rise in the HDI office in 1990 to 0.43 and 0.453 in year 2000. Although HDI indicates that there has been a slight improvement in living conditions in Nigeria, such improvement cannot be proved. Several attempts have been made to reduce the level of poverty. Many programs were initiated towards this end, so that by the end of 1998, there were 16 poverty alleviation institutions in Nigeria. Some of the institutions were sectoral and others were multi-sectoral in nature. The multi-sectoral programs included the National Directorate for Employment, NDE, the Directorate for Food, Roads and Rural Infrastructure, DFRI, Better Life for Rural Women, Family Support Program, the Family Economic Advancement Program, and the Petroleum Special Trust Fund. The NDE is charged with facilitating the process of employing workers. Unskilled people are taught skills and often given seed capital to begin businesses. All these agencies of government involved similar measures to reach the rural poor in particular. The PTF was like a special extra ministerial department that carried out projects covering several services, roads, hospitals, and educational institutions. Many beneficial projects were carried out through the PTF. National Development Strategy. Since 1960, when Nigeria obtained independence from Britain, several plans and strategies have been put in place to launch the country on a sustainable development path. Repeated efforts have been made by successive governments to build people's capacity, ensure creativity, build self-confidence and self-discipline, responsibility, and mutual well-being. However, Nigeria has faced numerous challenges in achieving sustainable development since independence in 1960, in spite of its abundant human and natural resources. There were 2 development plans before independence for the periods 1946 to 1955 and 1956 to 1962. After independence, 5 national development plans have been put in place in Nigeria: 1962 to 1968, 1970 to 1974, 1975 to 1980, 1981 to 1985, and 1988 to 1992. The Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, followed by a 2-year national rolling plan strategy starting from 1990 to 1992, was expected to fit into a 15-year perspective plan. The Vision 2010, another development plan, was followed by the Vision 2020 plan and the National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategies, that is NEEDS 1 and NEEDS 2. The current administration has also adopted NEEDS and Vision 2020, both of which incorporate its 7-point agenda. Several structural problems prevent the full achievement of those plans. Summary. In this study session, you learned that over the years, Nigeria has started on an average growth rate of less than 5% per annum since 1960 to date. The country experienced rapid economic growth between 1960 and 1970 with the average growth rate of real GDP of about 6.1%. The growth experience of this period was brought about by export boom of such primary products as agricultural produce like cocoa, groundnut, and palm oil. This economic performance was further consolidated by the discovery and large commercial quantity export of crude petroleum. The cumulative effect of the poor economic performance is also reflected in the level of unemployment in the country. In both the urban and rural areas, unemployment has remained high over the years. This is the end of study session 13. Thanks for listening.